90 cents of each dollar spent by the consumer. They also look at the turnover. When you spend $1 at the farmer's market, that money is turned over in the community because the farmer has to go to the local feed store to buy fertilizer, to buy seeds. Instead of going to Albertsons and spending that dollar where it goes, the profits go to their headquarters or wherever they're located. And make a point to know where your food comes from, read labels. Again, the average meal travels 1,500 miles from the farm to your dinner plate. I've tried this a little bit. We don't want to eat too much, but I know a couple times I've gone out and I've asked, like every time, where's your lettuce from? Where's your beef from? And a lot of times the servers in the restaurant don't know. They go back in the kitchen, they ask. But I think it's good for us to just ask. Make them aware of what some of the issues are, that you are concerned about local food. You would like to see local food on the menu at Jubin's and these other nice restaurants, that they can source local. The other issue is food safety. There is an issue with contaminated food, with illnesses, and I'm sure you've all heard about this over the last couple of years with the spinach scare. Was it last year or the year before in the summer? We thought it was tomatoes, but it was actually the jalapeno peppers that were contaminated. And job protections for farm workers and food processors, ensuring fair wages and other protections. I think over Christmas I heard some stories about slavery in Florida. Actually, farm workers being forced into working immigrant labor there, which is still occurring in some locations in the United States. So it's a serious issue. I know there's a movement to ask that the Florida tomato growers pay a little bit more, or charge a little bit more so that workers will receive a better wage. So that's an issue. And the one thing that I thought was missing from that piece was, plant a garden, even a small one, or support those people who do plant a garden. And this is from my class like 2 years ago. This young lady is now living in New Orleans, and she has a garden project where she's living. I haven't been down there to see it. And this is from many years before, because you'll see that there's a building missing here, right? Rick? The hotel is not here at this time. That was, it's from my gardening class. We basically have students growing in a 5 by 10 foot plot for my organic gardening class. And with that, be happy to answer any questions. Perhaps we can have a dialogue about that. I brought some other books. Everything I wanted to do is illegal. More stories from the local food front. This is by Joel Salatin. Joel was in a piece on NPR during the election last year. You remember the story about, can you put lipstick on a pig? Well, they went to his farm, and he demonstrated that you can put lipstick on a pig.
That's right.
That was Joel. Joel, I met him once, and he is on the forefront of the food front. He's an animal. He has a farm in, I think it's Virginia. He raises animals there. And here's another one, This Organic Life. I've read that one. Another interesting book, kind of short, is Civic Agriculture, Reconnecting Farm, Food, and the Community. Just kind of gives an overview of all of that. So with that, be happy to answer any questions, or we had, yeah.
Carl, I noticed you had Alice Waters identified there, and that edible schoolyard project that she runs around San Francisco, I think gets a lot of attention because of Chez Panisse, her famous restaurant. Have you found any, you mentioned Jubin's, have you found any restaurateurs in Baton Rouge who are at all responsive or interested in kind of taking the lead in doing this?
Well, that's a good question. We have a chef on our board of Slow Food, Baton Rouge, and we're trying to get some groundswell of support. I know some of the students have gone out, and actually there were 2 of my students had worked at restaurants, and there was some interest. There's issues with that because there's the issue of buying food locally, and if there's any contamination of the food. So in terms of food quality. Normally, if a grower, for instance, sells to Whole Foods, they have to have like a $3 million insurance policy to cover them. So you're not going to find a lot of small growers selling food to Whole Foods. They will often bring food like to the Bedar. They have a local grower will bring those greens in that are in the shopping basket. So the short answer is there isn't that much here. There is in New Orleans, and there's a group in New Orleans that actually had a meet and greet of chefs and buyers for high-end restaurants in New Orleans and growers. And there's a couple of growers that I can give as an example that there's a grower in Washington Parish who sells to Mila's in New Orleans. I've never been to Mila's, but that's a restaurant there. And he was knocking on doors and he says, look, I want to sell you food. So they have a connection. And that is not as common here as it is in other parts of Louisiana.
Carl,
Yes.
sorry, I was just going to add to that real quick. That Rufino's buys some local produce. They shop a good bit at the Thursday Farmers Market, and the chef there's pretty interested in local produce. I don't know what percentage they use. And then also Struby's downtown uses some local ingredients as well. And I know that Chelsea's had expressed a lot of interest and did a little bit in the summer, but I think we're going to talk to him again. He's thinking about doing like a Saturday night special, like a local special. That was kind of his idea in the beginning of where everything on the plate would be local. So there's some interest, but it's very minimal compared
Right,
to.
because there's that chef in New Orleans that has 4 restaurants. He has a farm behind his.
Yeah.
See, Mesh is really big into that.
Yeah,
And he buys stuff from some of the vendors at the market too for his restaurant.
Yeah, the Louisiana Rice Council, they did I'm not sure how they got the network, but they were able to get a lot of the chefs to come in and say, will you promote just for at the International Rice Meeting, and will you promote that you're using Louisiana rice for this week? And their response back from the chefs was, we wanted to have a program to showcase that Louisiana restaurants, especially in New Orleans, were using Louisiana products as much as they could. So I think that there's at least they were saying that there's a great need for that type of marketing.
Didn't something recently happen with the crawfish? It was similar to that, where the crawfish producers wanted local crawfish in the restaurants, or it's like you go to the restaurants now and
Well, it's a state law.
Yeah, they made law.
Yeah,
Well, and
all
also
shellfish.
interesting was, I think it was Outback, they made a commitment to only use Louisiana shrimp.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty big change.
That's true.
Like in Louisiana.
Okay. Yep, Joe.
I own some farmland that's being farmed by somebody else, but I own it because 180 years ago my great-great-grandfather homesteaded it. And for about the first 120 years, this farm grew crops and reared animals. But in the past 60 years, all animal production has been phased out of that farm. And that's true of most of the farms in that area. And I think that's probably true of most farms in the United States. That for a very, very long time, for many centuries, people reared animals and grew crops, but now they don't do that anymore. Fewer and fewer farms that are rearing crops rear any animals. Now, the question of soil fertility, people have manure which they put back in their fields. They don't do that anymore because they don't have animals anymore. And this is what I was saying. We're talking about land that's been farmed for generations with animals, but now is no longer using that because this change has come about. Is that something that we should be concerned about, or is this a good thing that those animals aren't going to contaminate the crops with their fecal matter?
Well, it's, like I said, there's always positives and negatives of that. And some people are horrified to have animals running through their garden, right? Because they're having birds drop whatever onto your produce. But if you look at some of the, well, there's 2 answers to that. Some farms I've been to, these sustainable farms, they do have animals integrated, and they're trying to get as much animal waste as they can to use on their farms. The other side of it is other people are learning other ways to do it. Some people don't want to have any animals because they don't want to have to harvest animals. And they're utilizing more cover crops wherever they can. Legumes in particular, because we have nitrogen being limiting from the system. So either way, if you're growing conventionally, you can just go to the store and buy, or go to the market and buy your 824-24. Somebody who's trying to be more sustainable, they would use cover crops, which would be plants that they would work into the ground that would add organic matter and fertilizer value. And then they may have to supplement. There are places where you can buy like poultry waste to add to your soils too, but there's issues with that. So it just depends, I think, on the person. I know there's 2 young farmers that started within the last couple of years, and they are basically, I think they're trying to do without animals. A lot of people don't want to harvest animals, and that's something that, it's a personal choice. But that's a good question. So I have a question for you. When you go to Liberia, or how do you support a local farmer there where they do have livestock there? And
They don't have it because of the war. They lost the animals in the war at the Haiti.
so they don't have any animals, so they have to.
They got some, the smaller livestock being reestablished, you'll find the goats and chickens coming back, though on a much smaller scale than before. Yes.
Right. See, rabbits, they say the rabbit manure is one of the best fertilizers that you can use, high value. And Southern has a rabbit project, but I don't think you can get any manure from them because they have people that would want to get it. So, but for me personally, I would not want to harvest rabbits. So, but that's a good question.
You gotta find somebody who wants to go to the rabbit harvest.
Yes.
Carl, there's a local chain of 2 or 3 food markets, the Fresh Pickens and Southside Produce. Most of the bagged stuff there is at least packaged in Lafayette. Do you know what the source of their produce is, though?
A lot of, they basically buy wholesale.
Yeah.
Primarily, so it's shipped in from wherever. It could be from California or Florida, or maybe some local growers, large-scale growers, and then they'll sell it. They also will have some of our small-scale growers, like sometimes people from the farmers market will go and deliver product there that after the market's over, right? I think that's a very common.
I think the point, like you said before too, is I actually talked to one of the farmers about it before, and because, again, most of it's coming in from the larger places in California and Florida, the price that they have to sell to those type of markets is so low that, I mean, it's almost not even worth. They might go after the market, like you say, if it's something that's a surplus, but to use that as a means of being sustainable, it just would never happen because they have to sell it so low.
Yeah, they may get only 25%
Right.
of the price you see, whereas at the farmers market, they get the whole dollar.
They do label it though there as local, or I mean not if it's not, but they have a table that says this is all locally grown.
They sometimes do, but then if you go during, like now, sometimes you see mustard greens there. I don't know if they're labeled local or not. You can ask them. Usually they will tell you. But that's a good question. It's hard to, and see, for me personally, I see a lot of students going out there to buy food, and really, we need to have a market like that in like Old South Baton Rouge, because to me, people need to eat good quality food, whether it's local or not. I mean, if they don't have access to it, that's an issue. But we also need to think about supporting local farm families. And there's a lot of talk about, well, will people be willing to spend another 10 or 20% of their income on food? If you want to have local, it may cost you more, but you're also sustaining the communities and the farms, and so there is a cost to everything that we do.
I guess this goes to your position on Greta, and so Darlene can chime in here, but with the mayor having just announced